Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today. We are very excited again to have Hallie Crawford here with us to talk about finding work that we love after 50. So a few housekeeping items, as always, before we get started. Please, if you could raise your hand if you can hear me. You'll notice that little hand button there that you can just click raise hand. Let me know that you can hear me. Great. I see hands going up. Fantastic. Good to know that you all are able to hear me and you're out there. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. My name is Hallie DeWald, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services here at the Career Center. I'm happy to be offering these webinars to our alum, and I think they are so valuable and so impactful, and hopefully they're helping you all with your own career choices. We typically have about 2 of these every month, and we have different guests. Hallie is a frequent guest of ours. She's fantastic, and we love having her. So we will hear more about her in just a second, but I just want you guys to know that please, if you're interested in, registering for these, visit our website at uga.edu, or career.uga.edu, and go ahead and check out the list of events that we offer. We have a lot of wonderful programs for you, including some virtual resume critiques and LinkedIn critiques that we will be doing next week. So you can take a look and register for those as well. And again, that's all under the events section on our website. I also wanted to let you all know that this webinar is being recorded, and a lot of people have questions about how that recording process works. So once Hallie's all done with the webinar today, I will be sending out an email probably a few hours after today's webinar with a link to the recording. Once you receive that link, you can just click on it and it'll ask you to just quickly register for it, but you can view it at any time after that. So that's awesome. You will have this information for you to go back to if you have questions or you missed something and you want to look at it, you can. Or if you can't stay with us for the full hour today. Again, so happy to introduce our guest speaker today, Hallie Crawford. Our presenter is a certified career coach, and she is a national career expert based in Atlanta, Georgia. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and team of coaches have helped thousands of people worldwide identify and transition into their dream careers. Hallie is regularly featured as a career expert in the media, and she has a wonderful website at www.HallieCrawford.com, and I'm sure she will be sharing more information about how you can connect with her and her resources throughout today's presentation. Again, today's presentation is going to be focused on those who are over 50, so finding work you love after 50. What does that look like as opposed to when you're a recent graduate or in your younger years. So we are so excited for her to be talking about this, and her expertise is going to be very, very useful. Please feel free to ask questions. Today's webinar is for you. So if you have questions that you would like for me to pose to Hallie, I will be doing so probably a little bit throughout the presentation and definitely at the end. If you have any trouble hearing me or hearing Hallie for that matter, go ahead and type that into the chat box and I'll be able to address that. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We are really happy to have Hallie. Without further ado, Hallie, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for being here today on your lunch hour. We greatly appreciate your time. And as Kelly said, we're going to be talking about finding work you love after 50. And I'm pretty close to 50, so these things are kind of near and dear to my heart as well, the tips and advice that we're going to give you today, because we work with our clients of all ages, but specifically within this age range, we work with our clients to help them find that right next encore career, if you will. And as I said, for me, it's becoming near and dear to my heart as I reach this age as well. So the first thing I wanted to just kind of let you know is that I do really understand how difficult, in some cases, it can be to find work that you actually truly enjoy after 50. I know I sound like I'm 20, I'm actually 46. And I've been coaching and training for over 18 years now, having my own business. And I absolutely love what I do. And I do continue to have a sense of purpose in my career. But I'll tell you that it's work sometimes. You know, even though I feel like I am meant to be a career coach and it's a very good fit for my personality type and skill set and everything else, there are still things that I need to do in order to truly enjoy it and have that sense of meaning and purpose. I have to work on it as well, make changes to my business and the way that I deliver our coaching services in order to stay challenged and fulfilled, okay? And we also know and understand that around 50 or over 50, things can happen to us, like you could be downsized. You may need to work longer because of the recession and losing some of your retirement income. The loss of fulfillment and what you've been doing if you've been doing it for so long, which is kind of like what I was talking about a second ago. And also, I know that people can feel unsure where you fit with new work environments and how different things are. We work with clients all the time who are experiencing these same issues, so please know that you're not alone, and we help them deal with these obstacles or concerns. And I'll tell you just one thing really quickly too, and then I'll move to the agenda here. You know, just when we talk about new and different work environments, one of our clients once said, you know, I got this new job, and he was working for a startup, and they were shooting Nerf guns all the time in the office. And he was just like, that doesn't work for me. And he felt awkward and like a fish out of water. So we totally understand that there can be lots of different kind of issues or concerns that you face over 50, which is why we're going to be talking about this today. So here is our basic agenda. And as Hallie said, we are going to have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. Just know, please, that if for any reason we don't get to your question or you think of another question afterwards, please don't hesitate to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. I'd be happy to respond to any additional questions that come up after the presentation today as well. Happy to do that. So here's our agenda. We want you to start by defining what's fulfilling to you so that you can find something that you will truly enjoy and that also pays your bills. We're going to talk about how to define what your career values are at this stage in life. Second, we're going to discuss our ideal career model and the pieces that you need to consider or the elements you need to consider in order to define what the right next career path is for you. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to expand your thinking. And part of this, everybody, is, you know, how to brainstorm career ideas online, the jobs that would be a fit for you at this point, and how to really think outside the box, but understand and find out what else is out there that could be a fit for you. Because as you all can imagine, there are just so many different jobs that we don't even know exist. And there are a lot of tools online these days that can help you identify what those different options are, okay? So we're going to talk about those things for our agenda today. Oh, and as a quick reminder as well, you will get the recording, as Hallie said, but please feel free if you would like to not feel like you have to frantically write everything down today. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint slides, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We would be happy to share the slides with you so that you can download those, especially with the career model in a little bit, so that you can print that out and, you know, hand write on it if you need to, okay? Feel free to ask us for those. Okay, so why is this important? Why is it important to talk about, you know, at this age range, finding work that you truly enjoy? So for some people, it's just actually finding work because professionals over 50, they do face different fears and concerns. And we hear these kinds of things all the time from our clients. Some of them are on this slide. They may be fearful or concerned about age discrimination and have experienced that in the past. They may have concerns regarding, you know, financial stability. And by the way, everyone, as I'm reading these out, please write down any concerns or fears or obstacles that you feel you have that you need to start to work on overcoming, because that can help kind of frame out what your questions may be later on, okay? So age discrimination is one possible issue you may be concerned about. Another one could be, you know, financial stability and making sure that you are able to work as long as possible, for example, you know, through retirement. The changing work environment, like I discussed just a few minutes ago, not being sure like how and where do I fit in, whether it's the work environment or it's, you know, where do I leverage and use my skill set instead of what I've been doing before. So this is why this is so important, because there are differences, obviously, in job seeking when you're over 50 versus, for example, when you're in your 20s. Completely different, right? The good news is that we're going to talk about today, obviously, is that you can find that fulfillment and you can find a way to find work that would be rewarding for you, but also take care of your bills and, enable you to be practical at the same time, okay? One of the things that I always want to tell people is, as we're, looking through these slides and talking about this today, is I want you to know that we realize too that this isn't Pollyanna. It's not like wave a magic wand and suddenly this awesome job is going to appear where you don't have to work that hard and, you get paid a ton of money. It's not about that. You will have to compromise in some way, shape, or form. We all do in terms of our career paths. At any age, we compromise in different ways, but our goal is, and you'll see this when we talk about the career model in a few slides, our goal is that you are choosing where you're compromising and you're okay with those compromises because you've really thought it through versus just feeling desperate or like you have to take something just to go take it, okay? So please know that what we are going for people is the good so far outweighs the bad about what you're looking for and what you're, hoping to secure in the long run, that you barely notice the bad stuff that you don't like quite as much, okay? Because I do want you to know, for me, there are plenty of things that I don't like about being a coach and owning my own business, but I can tolerate those because I went into it with my eyes open, and there are things that the good stuff so far outweighs the bad that I barely notice the things that I don't like as much. So that's kind of the right perspective to take on this whole process, okay? So let's talk about step number one, and that is to define fulfillment, okay? And we have our clients define fulfillment first, by the way, because it impacts the rest of the career model. I'll show that to you on the next slide here in just a second. So one of the things, if you look on the slide, and I'll explain why there's a mermaid on there, one of the things that can help you begin to define what would be really rewarding to you first in terms of your next career step is you can think about and dig underneath like hobbies and interests that you've had, even in the past, 10 years or so. Also go back and think about number 2 on this slide here. Think about your early career path and what was appealing to you at that time. Because sometimes in order to really tap into what's rewarding for us, we have to think about why did we get into the profession that we've been in this whole time? Why did we get into that in the first place? Okay. So one of the ways to get started on knowing what you want, whether it's a job change or an industry change or not, is to write a list of things that you want to have in a job. This is a very basic but preliminary important exercise, okay? And 2 of the ways to do this are on this slide here. Think about, things that you have liked and disliked about your previous jobs, okay? And write down the opposite of those things that you haven't liked. What do you want to have instead? And then as part of what's on the slide here, dig underneath your passions and your dreams, okay? Because even if those things that are on your list aren't practical for you to go get a job in, it's not going to pay you enough or whatever the situation is, there could be clues to possible values or elements and things that you would like to have in a career that you can find in different career paths. I'll give you a quick example. The reason why there is a mermaid from WikiWatchy on the slide here is because as a kid, I grew up in Florida and we went to WikiWatchy a ton, and I vividly remember going there. And at the time I thought, oh my gosh, I want to be a mermaid at WikiWatchy. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And obviously that's not the most practical thing for me. It turned out that, that wasn't the thing that I was going to be doing for a lot of different reasons. But when I thought about my career path and when I was brainstorming ideas and I thought about, this childhood dream, I realized that there were actual values underneath that dream of, there's the element of like entertainment. And one of the things that I love to do as a coach, in addition to educating people, which is another thing that these mermaids do, is educating people about the ocean and that kind of thing. So 2 of my values are education and also entertaining people to a certain extent in order to get them to learn things. I love conducting these webinars. I love hosting workshops, etc. So there's a part of me that does those things as a coach right now. And then a third value for me is actually the value of risk. That is something that is a career value for me as well, which we'll talk about in just a moment. There is a little bit of an element of risk that was appealing to me about, thinking about being a mermaid, okay? So I want you to think about, and even though some of your hobbies or interests again, like I said, are not the most practical thing for you to pursue in terms of your next career path, think about what about those things is appealing to you. And can you incorporate those elements, whether it's creativity or education or training or something else, can you incorporate those things into a possible career path for you? Okay, so that is one way to get started on thinking about what could be fulfilling and rewarding. Next, let's take a look at the career model, and I'm going to go into greater depth or detail with the model here in just a few moments in a few more slides. But I wanted you to notice that at the bottom right here in blue, we start with fulfillment with our, our clients at the very beginning of the process, okay? This ideal career model shows you the 8 things that you need to be considering in order to know the right next career path for you, the next step, okay? We help our clients define what's fulfilling first, and that's what I want you all to do at the very beginning, because defining that first versus thinking about compensation first or work environment or strengths, when you define fulfillment first, that will help you brainstorm alternative career ideas that you hadn't thought of before. It'll help you think of things that you can do outside of work to find that fulfillment as well, if that's the best way for you to do it, whether it's volunteer work or, serving on a board. If you have to just get a job to pay the bills, at least for the moment, while you work towards something that would be more fulfilling, or you get that fulfillment outside of your work, that's what's going to help you define those different career paths and those different ideas outside of work in order to make this happen. The other reason why we have our clients define what's fulfilling to them first is if you take a look on the slide here, the fulfillment piece basically impacts every other piece. If you are not leveraging your strengths on a consistent basis in the job that you pursue, you're not going to be fulfilled. If you're not getting compensated adequately, you're not going to be fulfilled. If you're not in the right work environment, same thing. So the fulfillment piece also impacts every other piece of the model, which is, again, part of why we start with it. It's critically important, and it will help you think outside the box more and really brainstorm alternative ideas, okay? So let's take a look at other ways that we can begin to define fulfillment, okay? So there are 4 elements on this slide here, and then Callie, if we can get to the poll here, the first one in just a moment, that would be great. The other ways for you all to define fulfillment, and I would encourage you to write these down and take on one as a homework assignment for the next week, okay, is to think about and kind of journal about how you define success. So what does success mean to you now after 50 versus what it did at the beginning of your career? Usually it's very different, or at least different enough that it's worth kind of looking into this more and digging underneath. So what does success mean to you at this point? I'm working with a client who's over 50 right now. He's one of several that we've been working with in the past few months here. But for him, success is completely different. For him, fortunately, he has a great amount of financial stability, and he's looking for something that has more meaning and a sense of community for him, but that also impacts the community. For another person, it may be, I define success as I need to make this amount of money, but at the same time, I want to have this, impact on my community or on this, certain type of population, whatever it is. So write down and think about, everyone, how do you define success now? The second thing to do is to identify and look at your interests. This is similar to what we talked about on the previous slide. What are things that you do, whether it's watching TV or going to the movies or books that you read? What are the themes between those things that you're seeing that demonstrate what some of your values are and what some of your interests might be? So, for example, I am actually really drawn to, I horseback ride on a regular basis. I love going snow skiing, and I also like kind of sci-fi shows, honestly, and movies. The reason why, or the common theme between all of those, everybody, is that value of risk. I don't like the sci-fi shows because of space or something like that. That might be another person's interest and why it's there. But for me, a common theme is that, element of risk and challenge. That's one of my values. So think about your interests, things that you lose track of time when you're participating in those, and what is underneath that demonstrates to you what you'd like to have in a job. A third way to define fulfillment for yourself is to think about what would be your ideal day at work. If you could have it any way you wanted, write that down and what the elements would be. We always tell our clients, go for the goals, get as close as you possibly can. Write down what the dream would be. Don't compromise too soon in the process, because if you do, if you play small, you'll get small. But if you go for what you would ideally really want at the beginning, you can always compromise later on, but you'll get closer to that dream than you would have otherwise. And the fourth thing to do that I've referenced, a couple times today already, is to start to identify what your top 3 career values are, okay? And here's how we do this with our clients, is we have them participate in or write down a time in their life which they would consider being a peak experience. It could be a moment in time, it could be a period of time. And we have them think about this peak experience as a personal peak experience, not something that was work related, because that will get closer to who they are as a person and what's really important to them deep down. They write about this peak experience, and then they talk with us about it. You could talk with a friend or family member. I'm happy to talk with you about it, whatever works. But talk about it with someone else and have them help you pull out the values that they see and hear in your story. What are the common themes that you're talking about? So for example, 2 people may have, a trip to Italy was a peak experience for them. But one person, while they're talking about that, may be describing a lot about the food and the people and the atmosphere there and the culture and how exciting that was for them, that learning experience about all of those things. One of their values may be culture and maybe education, versus another person with that same, peak experience, a trip to Italy, for example, may be talking about the planning of it. And planning and organizing is one of their values. So you can see how, as an example there, how the same even, peak experience for 2 different people can bring out 2 different sets of values. So that's why it's really important to talk with somebody else to get their feedback on what they're hearing you say. So Callie, if we could do the first poll, that would be great. I'm curious how many people on the call today feel like you know what your career values are already. And by the way, if you don't, that's okay. We always have to work with our clients on those. That's one of the first things we do with them in order to help them start to brainstorm different career ideas. So it's totally okay if you haven't or don't know about these. These are the exercises that you can conduct and participate in order to figure this out. So Callie, just let me know how we're doing when you get the results, please.
Yeah, we have about 64% of people who have already participated. I'll give it another 10 seconds or so, and we'll go ahead and close it and take a look.
Okay, cool. And by the way, everyone, while you're finishing up participating in the poll, thanks for doing that, your career values may have changed somewhat since you were earlier in your career. So a lot of you may feel like, gosh, I know what they are. Think about them again, because even if they are the same to a certain extent, if nothing else, the order of your career values could have changed based on age and life experience. So that's part of what you want to be paying attention to as well, is not just what they are, but the order that they're in at this stage in your life. So Callie, let us know our results, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So 72% said yes, they are aware of their career values, and 28% said no. So
good. That's great. I'm glad that you all are. So think about, for me, especially those of you who feel like they know what they are, that's perfect. Please think about kind of your next step would be to prioritize them on a list of 1 to 5, for example. Which ones are the most important? Because that will impact your career direction. And then the second thing that you want to think about, everyone, is you want to think about how you define those values at this point in your career, because in some cases you may be defining them differently. One of the third things in terms of career values, and then we'll get to this next slide here, reviewing the career model, is when you're brainstorming career options, which we'll talk about in step number 3 today, your values can be clues to keywords that you want to input into the job boards and the career brainstorming sites that I'll show you in just a few minutes. Okay, so step number 2 is to review the career model in order to identify what the next step would be career-wise, but also, everyone, to help you brand yourself and sell yourself. So we'll look at the career model right now. for these two purposes, okay? So fulfillment we talked about already. What is going to be rewarding and fulfilling to you? One of the things when you're speaking with your network, though, and when you're conducting informational interviews as well as actual interviews, you do want to tell them why this job would be rewarding for you. It's okay to talk about that, and we actually encourage people to describe or even talk about what their values are and why it's aligned with the organization and vice versa. Because especially at this stage in your life, you want to let them know, in specific cases even more so, if you're applying for a job that you may seem overqualified for, you want to let them know why you want to take it and why you're okay with that you are still going to be challenged for these reasons, why you're not going to get bored and just leave, a year later, which could be one of their concerns. So the fulfillment piece is also important, not just in terms of the meaning for you, but in terms of selling yourselves as well. You need to talk about that and why the job would be rewarding and meaningful for you. And that's why you may be okay to compromise a little bit on the salary or whatever it is. Okay. You also want to think about the top tasks that you want to be performing on a regular basis during the course of your workday. That's where the enjoyment piece comes in. So you want to think about, okay, what are the top 5 tasks that I would most like to be performing on a consistent basis in order to figure out what the right fit is? That's the enjoyment piece. Then you want to look at and identify what your strengths are. Obviously, this goes towards selling yourselves as well. One of the tools that we like to use or suggest to our clients, which is a very just easy, simple tool, is the StrengthsFinder assessment. You can find that at strengthsfinder.com. It's a $20 assessment. You can get your top 5 strengths. Your top 5, by the way, is plenty. They do have an alternative option where you can get like your top 30 strengths. We think the top 5 is plenty. The thing that we like about the StrengthsFinder assessment as well is it does give you language that you can use and leverage during the course of interviews to speak about your strengths more effectively and articulately, okay? So you want to ensure that you understand not just what your strengths are so that you're using them and finding the right fit, but you also obviously have to be clear about the strengths that you bring to the table, especially given your age and how long you've been in the working world. What are the advantages to that? So don't shy away from or let the fear of age discrimination, everyone, set you back or make you feel less confident during the course of an interview or in your search. Own it and go for and talk with them about why hiring someone at your age is a benefit. You can hit the ground running. You've got not just work experience, but you have life experience and wisdom. There's going to be less kind of drama going on with you because you'll be able to hit the ground running and just get going and have a lot to bring to the table in terms of just life experience as well. You'll have and hopefully have a larger network to draw upon. You can mentor people that are younger there, and you just have all this wisdom and experience that you bring to the table. So don't hide from, if we look at education and experience next, don't hide from those things. And instead, during the course of your interview and when you're networking with people, be sure to articulate and talk about why your age works to your advantage and to their advantage as well. You can get results faster and more effectively because of the experience that you've had. The next 2 pieces on the model, you want to think about, okay, gosh, classes that I've taken in the past, does that give me any clues to what I might want to be doing in the long run? Another thing to think about in terms of education, everyone, is if you feel rusty on some skills that the millennials have, or if you're looking at startups or whatever it is, check out online classes at places like lynda.com or in-person courses at the General Assembly. I've heard great things about their classes, and those are local. In Atlanta, Ponce City Market is where that is located, but they have them in large cities as well. Think about what kind of coursework you may need to take to make you feel more confident and freshen up your skills in terms of selling yourselves as well. Past experience. Think about your past experience, what you want to bring forward and what you want to leave behind in terms of the right, work environment and the types of tasks you want to perform and everything else. And also, again, this is where we talked about tout your experience. Don't shy away from it, okay? And the last three pieces that we have everyone look at that we would suggest for you is you need to consider to know the right career direction, your personality type, the right work environment, and what compensation you need to have. So personality type goes to, are you more extroverted versus introverted? And what does that mean in terms of the course of your day and how much you need to be working with other people versus alone? It's also whether you're more a leader or a big picture person versus detail oriented, or a strategist versus, a project manager, okay? So you need to think about your strengths as well in terms of your personality type. And you absolutely want to include that, everyone, when you're selling yourselves too. We definitely encourage you to not just talk about the hard, tangible skills and experience that you've had in the past, but talk about who you are as a person, whether it's a strong work ethic, your leadership capability. Give them a one sheet about your leadership style. If you're going for a higher level position, don't just submit your resume, submit to them a one sheet that talks about what your management and leadership style and philosophy is. Provide to them during the course of the interview a 30, 60, 90-day plan for what you would do if you got that job, so that they can understand, oh my goodness, this person, because they have this experience and this wisdom, they can really hit the ground running, and these are the results that they would achieve, okay? So think about soft skills as well as hard skills when you're selling yourselves during the course of an interview. And finally, think about the right work environment, what's going to be best for you, more traditional and formal, or more laid back and more of, one of the startup environments. Whatever works best for you, you need to consider that, because work environment is a make or break for being in the right fit, everyone. So you want to think about that and how you would fit into it. And then finally, last but not least, it's actually one of the most important things to consider is compensation. What do you need to be and want to be compensated for this particular job and where you're at right now, okay? And Callie, thanks for sharing the StrengthsFinder assessment link. So we encourage you to print out this career model, everyone, and look at it, in depth in order to really figure out what, for this next career step for you, how have things changed over time, and what do you want next based on these different pieces of the model, okay? If any of you feel like you need some more help with these and want to talk about any of these pieces a little bit further in, greater detail and more specifics for your situation, I'm happy to do that. Happy to offer a free career strategy session for anyone who's attended today or who's listening into the recording. Happy to chat with you about that, because I understand that some of this advice is kind of general across the board for this age range, and sometimes you have specific needs that you need to talk through a little bit. Happy to do that, just email us. And feel free, like I said at the beginning, to email me if you have additional questions that you think of after today. So let's talk about the career brainstorming as our final step here to help you really think outside the box and identify what is out there, leveraging online tools and resources to help you identify what different types of jobs are out there, so you can get a feel for what the job market is like in your local area for your skill set. So the difficult thing that we find, if you take a look at this slide about, people in career transition or looking to find that next path, is the problem comes in where there's so many factors to consider in order to figure out the right path, just like we, showed you with the career model. And there really is no website out there with one comprehensive list of all the different kinds of career paths and jobs out there. It just doesn't exist. So as a result, we have found, understandably, that a lot of career seekers just get frustrated and they stay where they are for too long because they don't know how to approach this whole thing, and it gets tough. So I wanted to share with you the 4-step process that we have our clients go through that helps them be much more effective and efficient with their online research to find out what's out there and brainstorm different ideas. So the 4 steps are coming up with a list of keywords based on your values, based on your interests, based on your strengths. Those are ways you can come up with keywords. Then we have you go through general search sites like Google or Bing, general just kind of search sites, and I'll explain this more in just a moment. There are career brainstorming sites specific for this purpose, and I'll share those with you in just a moment as well. And then finally, we have everyone look through and brainstorm ideas on job boards too. So this is the 4-step process that we have our clients work through. One of the things that we always want to tell people in advance before they do this, because we've had plenty of people say, you know, without this process, they totally just get lost in the internet and it's been a couple hours and they don't know where they are. We recommend that you use Excel or a similar worksheet to track the keywords that are working for you and are pulling up jobs that look appealing for you, to track the career ideas that you're coming up with, pages online that you want to come back to when you want to read in greater depth, any requirements and salary ranges that you're finding for each of these career ideas, and then also the networking connections that you're making. So Callie, if you could pull up the second poll here, that would be great, about how effective do you feel your networking skills are. We're going to talk about this for just a moment. So people over 50 just naturally, usually, have a broader network. That just comes with the territory. I do now as well because of my age. And one of the things that you really need to lean on and that you bring to the table in terms of a selling point for yourselves is your strong network. So if for any reason you have not been networking as much as you possibly could in the past few months or in the past year, whatever it is, now is the time to start beefing up your network again or reaching out to people again. Going to lunch, having coffee. We recommend informational interviews. Just chat with people over the phone for 10 minutes to let them know this is what I'm looking at. I'm considering getting into one of these career paths or going into this organization. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it's like out there? You want to ask for information. Callie, go ahead and share the results if you're ready.
Yeah, so it looks like we have 56% said that they have good networking skills, 38% said poor, and 6% said excellent.
Oh, good. We've got some excellence. I love it. I think I would fall in the category, and I'll be honest with you, in the middle range of good. It kind of depends on the day. Good to excellent, depending. So the networking piece, everyone, one of the things that I wanted to tell you is we do have an Excel sheet that you can use. It's a job search worksheet. Feel free to email us. We are happy to give it to you. It's pre-filled out to help you do this brainstorming and stay organized and track it. But the other thing that I wanted to tell you all as well is just because there's LinkedIn now does not mean that networking is no longer the way to find a job. It still is. The hidden job market is still critically important. The thing that has changed with LinkedIn is now, as I'm sure you've heard, many employers, up to 80% of employers report that their networking or their recruiting efforts are conducted online. So employers and recruiters spend a lot of time on LinkedIn trying to identify and find employees that they want to approach and see if they'd like to come on board, if they're working somewhere else or not. This was years and years ago. At least my son is 11. It was before he was born, so it was about 12 years ago, give or take. I could be off by a couple of years, but I attended and was a panelist for a career seminar, and one of the recruiters there said he spent up to 8 hours a day sometimes on LinkedIn trying to find candidates. So one of the things that you all need to make sure that you do is enhance and update and leverage LinkedIn enormously, because it is the way to go for career seekers and these days, and also in-person networking as well. LinkedIn just helps you expand that network a lot faster and in a broader way. So let's talk about the websites here, and I'll get to LinkedIn closer to the end here a little bit more, and we can ask questions about it if we need to. But the basic overview of the different sites that we want you to leverage and plug your keywords into are the general search sites, the career sites, and the job boards. And by the way, we want you to do these in this order because it's like a funnel. You start with the broad sites first, and you funnel it down to the job boards over time, okay? So here are some of the tools I wanted to share with you that we recommend. This very top one here on the slide, Second Act Careers, is just a really good book to check out. It gives you an overview of a lot of different career paths that are out there and describes what they're like, can give you some possible ideas. onetcenter.org, myplan.com, and America's Career Info, and My Skills, My Future. The rest of those on this bulleted list here, everyone, these are career brainstorming sites. So after you Google careers in data analysis, if that is one of your strengths, for example, or careers in training and development, if education was one of your values, after you Google those, you start to look at these brainstorming sites. That's the next step, and these are some examples that you can use. And then finally, at the bottom here, you want to plug those keywords into job boards. The ones that we like are Indeed and Glassdoor. I know that there's a Jobs for Dogs webpage too. Callie, if you want to stick that in the chat box, feel free. That's another place that you can plug in your keywords to see what's out there, okay? And there are also, remember, industry-specific job boards too. Idealist.org is one example. This tends to be for nonprofits and foundations, for example. And then marketinghire.com, this is another website specifically for marketing professionals. Those are some examples to give you. So one of the things that we would encourage you to do in order to brainstorm ideas as well is look at industry-specific associations locally to network with people, but also to see if they have job boards where you can connect with others and apply online. So step number one, as we said at the beginning here, is to define your list of keywords, interests, and skills. And I gave you an example just a moment ago, data analysis, event planning, education. Those are some keywords that you can plug into these different websites, okay? Step two is to cast your net really wide at the beginning, put career or jobs in front of your keywords, just to see if there's any articles written out there about this career path that can give you more insight about what it's like, or an industry association that's specific to that. You can get a lot of really good information just by kind of Googling around a little bit with this. The second thing that you want to do is you want to brainstorm, or I should say this is step number 3, but the next kind of level of sites would be those websites I gave you a moment ago, the career brainstorming websites. You want to plug your keywords into there because this can help you narrow down your ideas and begin to think about making things real, like what are the salary, what are the requirements, and what's the compensation related to this. So several of those websites will give you the requirements for each career path, and they'll give you a range of what the salary is as well. Remember that there's good salary research, by the way, everyone, on both Indeed and Glassdoor. If you look on this next slide, the fourth step is you want to search on job boards to narrow down your ideas even more and perhaps start applying. Glassdoor and Indeed is the salary research that we like. So the last step is to search the job boards as well. And I also encourage you very strongly to leverage LinkedIn to search their job board also, because that's a very good one. And these three don't have a lot of junk on them. We find that some of the other larger sites have a lot of different things on them and things that you might not be interested in, okay? And then the last step that you want to take, and then we'll get to Q&A here in just a second, Callie, is obviously once you have narrowed down what you want to pursue, you want to make sure that you revise your resume effectively and your LinkedIn profile, as we mentioned. I've had a few people come to me lately and say, oh, I don't need a resume anymore, right? Because I have my LinkedIn profile. No, LinkedIn has not taken the place of resumes yet. And people will also ask us, oh, I thought I didn't need a cover letter anymore because of LinkedIn. You still need to have a cover letter. It's better to submit something so that you demonstrate to them, it's an additional chance for you to sell yourself. And it also demonstrates to them that you care about the job, you cared enough to write that cover letter, that you're articulate, and it gives you another chance to sell some of your strengths and skills. So a couple of things in terms of revising your resume and LinkedIn profile. And if anyone needs additional help with this, it sounds like, Callie, you've got some events coming up regarding this. We are happy to help you with it as well in a strategy session, happy to do that. You have to make sure that all three materials, cover letter, resume, and LinkedIn, they represent and communicate your brand. The big tips that we find people need to remember typically is you've got to check the formatting, make sure it's up to date and doesn't look out of date and older. In the over 50 crowd, that's what we tend to find a lot of the time is their resume may not have been updated in a long time and it looks kind of out of date, so the formatting needs to be improved. Make sure that you use white space. Don't throw everything on there and keep it consistent across all of your bullet points and everything else, in terms of formatting. Include keywords that are going to be important for the employer, okay? Do this on LinkedIn as well, because remember, employers and recruiters are looking for people that have your brand of talent, and they're going to plug in certain keywords to find you. Mention your marketable results. Always make sure that your bullet points on your resume have tangible results at the end, aren't just kind of a list of tasks. And make sure as well, and Callie, if you can do this third poll here, that would be great. How many of you know how to leverage LinkedIn effectively for networking purposes? Let's ask that one, please. Make sure with your resume, everyone, that you have a summary at the top. It's not an objective. We actually don't really agree with having an objective. We want people to have a summary at the top that sells them, as well as a bulleted list of qualifications that are relevant, okay? And finally, as you all are doing this poll, we like our clients to have one master copy of their resume that they work from. They don't touch it. They work from that one to create every resume that they're using to apply for different jobs, okay? Because that master resume will have everything on there that you need to use. Okay, great. Callie, if you can share the results of the poll, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so 71% of folks said no. They do not know how to leverage LinkedIn at this point for networking purposes, and 29% said yes. You can definitely spend some time.
Okay. Yes. Okay, good. So, Callie, we should do a LinkedIn webinar coming up soon. Happy to do that. We'll talk about that. So, one of the things that I would like you all to do at this point, and we can talk a little bit about LinkedIn before we close today as well, is I want you all to think about, based on everything we've discussed today, one action step that you will take in this next week, so by next Wednesday, in order to move forward with finding the right position and what's going to be the right next step for you and making it happen, okay? Just as a quick reminder, if you'd like to get some additional advice or ask questions on anything else that we discussed today or anything outside of what we talked about today, please feel free to email me. I'd be happy to chat with you, admin@halliecrawford.com. One of the things I want to leave you with, and then if we have some LinkedIn questions, like I said, I'm happy to answer those. But I want you to keep in mind that even when you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to learn about, networking on LinkedIn, I feel intimidated by it, whatever is going on, remember that without risk, there's no reward. The greatest risk in life is not taking one. This is the quote that always gets me through those times when I just don't feel like stepping out of my comfort zone or something feels overwhelming to me. This is the quote I always remember and keep on my desk to remind me to move forward. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Let's go ahead, Callie, and if you can read out some of the questions, that would be great. And like I said, if anyone has any additional LinkedIn questions or anything else they need to chat with me about, happy to answer, just email us, okay? So, Callie, I'm ready if we've got any.
Okay, so I think we'll leave people a little bit of time to ask questions, but I do want one thing just to clarify. A couple people have probably taken StrengthsQuest in the past, or StrengthsFinder, excuse me, and, do those results change? Is it valuable for folks who have already taken it maybe a few years ago to take it again, do you think? What would you advise?
Great question. I love that. So I would actually recommend taking it again. If it's only been a year since you last took it, usually they will stay the same within that amount of time. But if it's beyond that, I recommend taking it again. And the reason why is your strengths, everyone has, a list of within their database, let's say a list of their top 30 strengths, right? Sometimes your strengths will change, not just in terms of priority, especially if your job has changed, which it usually does over time. So what your strengths are now, or that would be listed on, your top 5, they may not be the same as when you were 20, but they may have just shifted in terms of priority. So I do recommend taking them because what we have found is a lot of times people's strengths might be the same or similar, but they may have changed in terms of the order because their role has changed and the strengths that they're leveraging are different based on that. I hope that answers. I feel like it was a really long-winded answer. But if it's beyond or if it's been longer than a year, I definitely would recommend taking it. In part too, because it will help you articulate those strengths effectively during the course of an interview, like we said. That will help with that piece as well. So that's a great question, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a couple of other questions here. One question just is about the resume you mentioned earlier, keeping it to a modern format. What did you necessarily mean by modern format?
Sure, great question. So it needs to have, like, people need now to have headers that stand out clearly with, you know, that are bold and really clear on the page. And in some cases, you can use different fonts. These days also, though, people are putting different lines to separate sections on their resume. I'll also have clients do a short little, like, 1 or 2 bullet points underneath each job that has their career or their job highlights from that position. So that's a little bit more modern as well. Other people will put LinkedIn recommendations on their resume underneath each you know, one of the jobs, whatever is relevant there. So those are some of the different kind of formatting things you can do, all the way to something that is a little bit more modern, quote unquote, is they'll have a left-hand side column that has a bulleted list of their qualifications and, for example, their education. And then, you know, they'll have a line, and then the rest of the resume on the right is, you know, all of their past work experience or current work experience. So the layout is just a little bit different and a little bit more complicated typically these days. Hopefully that gives you, you know, the beginning of an answer.
How far back on a resume do you think that you should go?
Typically, it doesn't need to go. If there's something over 10 years old, you can drop it. If one of those items, though, or that experience that's over 10 years old would be relevant to the job, though, that you're applying for, then you want to leave it on because you want to have anything that would be relevant to help sell yourself. But beyond 10 years, usually you can drop it. One of the things that I did want to say as well, too, for everybody is, if you feel like, if, for example, you have a PhD or you have some other experience that you feel may be making you look overqualified for the job, and like you might ask for more money, for example, because you have all of this experience, I have had clients just remove those from their resume. For example, a woman, the PhD, they kept saying, well, you're too overqualified, you're going to get bored and we're not going to talk with you. She just removed it. You can't lie on your resume, but you can omit things that aren't relevant. And her PhD, for the jobs that she was looking at, it wasn't relevant, so she removed it. So keep that in mind, everyone, as well. If you feel like you need to remove some things that are going to cause a problem for you, making you look overqualified, you can always talk about them in the interview if you have to. But your resume is a selling piece for yourself about the things that would be relevant for the job. It's not everything plus the kitchen sink. And in terms of the salary range, by the way, if you're concerned that one of their red flags from the employer might be that you're going to demand, you know, or ask for too much money, you can reference that in your cover letter if you have to. We don't want you to undercut yourselves, obviously, but you can reference that this is why I want this job, and I am willing to be flexible on the salary because I'm choosing this career path, this next path, more for the meaning than the compensation or whatever, you know. But I just wanted to throw that out there as well. That's something that comes up for the over 50 crowd frequently.
Yes. Another question that's just related, you know, how do you get past automated application systems or recruiters who may be excluding a person based on age or experience discrimination?
Sure. So this, again, is where you can leave some things off if that's going to be best in the situation. And in terms of the keywords, there's actually a blog post that my resume writer wrote about this. So if this doesn't answer well enough, please feel free to email me and I can link you, whoever's asking this question, I can link you to that because I want to make sure I get this correct. One of the things to do is to look at and kind of go across, you know, 4 or 5 of the job descriptions for positions that look appealing to you and identify what kind of the buzzwords and keywords are that they're referencing that you may not have in your resume yet, and make sure that those are there. That's part of the piece of it. And then actually, if you would email me at the email on the slide, there is a little bit more there, and I'd like to look at that blog post from my resume writer because she's more of the expert with that, and I can email you the rest of the answer for that, just to be safe. One thing I do know about the computer scanning software, though, when you're creating your resume, you want to be careful about like underlining words and not do that. It's okay to use lines on your resume, but don't underline words because sometimes that messes up the system and the computer systems won't read those. So that's one thing to think about as well. Another thing actually that I just thought of too is ideally if you can identify some recruiters that you've either worked with in the past or through the UGA alumni network and kind of pick their brain a little bit, they can give you ideas about the right keywords to use or kind of buzzwords in the industry as well. But I would definitely start with kind of the research on the different job openings. That's a great place to start.
Would you say that there are differences for people that are older than 60? Or does everything that we've said today kind of apply to that age group as well?
It would apply to the age group as well. Pretty much the same, I would say. And then I can do one more question, Callie, and then I've got to run.
I have one more, so that's perfect. So people who are re-entering the market at an older age, what suggestions or advice? And I know we've just talked about this recently, but what advice do you have?
The main thing I would say is to own your age and your experience and really focus on being confident about what you bring to the table as a result of that and leading with it when you're talking with people. Because the only way to kind of combat the possible age discrimination and them making assumptions about you is to demonstrate and show why that has enormous value. You want to also make sure that you demonstrate and talk about that you're flexible, willing to take instruction, flexible to different work environments and any software that you're up to date on. You really want to think about and write down, okay, based on my past experience and my age, what are the top 3 or 4 things that an employer might be concerned about? I call these the red flags that you want to prepare before an interview. And don't let them have a chance to even ask you about those things because they might be thinking them and they might not ask you during the course of the interview. So instead, you frame out your star stories and your elevator speech and everything that you say to people when you're networking, plus also during the course of the interview, that you address those head on and talk about and say, I'm a flexible leader and here's an example of how. This software I understand inside and out because I took this class or whatever it was. So any red flags that they might have about you based on your age, you need to proactively bring those up in a positive way to combat any of those assumptions that they may be making and they might not say to you. So hopefully that helps as well before we go.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and I just love having you here. So, and people, again, feel free to contact Hallie if you have further questions. There's her email address there on the screen. Thanks so much for your time today, Hallie. We really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Good luck, everyone. Keep us posted.